Okay, hello Year 9 and welcome to the second part of the walking talking mock on the organisation questions that you did in the lesson before last. Please make sure that you have completed part 1 of this walking talking mock because we're going to be moving on about halfway through the paper, just over halfway through the paper for the final bit. There's not a huge amount on this one, so it will be relatively short. Obviously, the excess time is going to be putting your corrections and any additions to your mind maps or whatever revision you ended up doing for the revision lessons. So we're kick-starting off where we left. So question number 3 says the leaves of most plants have stomata. 3.1. Name the cells which control the size of the stomata. So it's worth 1 mark, and we just need to be able to identify what cells it is that controls the size of the stomata. The stomata are just the holes on the underside of the leaf, and they are surrounded by a cell, and those cells are the guard cells. So if you put guard cells in your answer, then that will be worth 1 mark. It is only worth 1 mark, so it's only going to be one type of cell, one answer to it. So well done if you remembered guard cell. Question 3.2. Give one function of the stomata. So what is it that those holes are actually there for? It's worth 1 mark, so please only give one function that you know to be correct. By putting in more than one function, if one is incorrect, then that would mean that you will get 0 marks. So answers that you could have given are to let CO2 in, or carbon dioxide in. You might have said to let oxygen out, or O2 out, or you might have just said gas exchange. Any one of those answers is correct, so well done if you got that. Okay, another maths question on this one. So figure 5 shows part of the surface of a leaf. So we've got a picture that's got 2 stomata on it, and it's given the size, so you've got 0.1 millimetre by 0.1 millimetres. The length and width of the piece of the leaf surface are both 0.1 millimetre. Calculate the number of stomata per millimetre squared of this leaf surface. So the number of stomata per millimetre squared. Now this is worth 2 marks. So if you see a maths question that is worth 2 marks, it normally means there's 2 things that you need to do. So for this, we can see that there's 2 stomata in a 0.1 by 0.1 millimetre square. So the first thing we need to do is find the surface area of 0.1 by 0.1. Now in maths you would know that to find the surface area of a square, you're just going to times the base by the height. So by putting 0.1 times 0.1 equals 0.01, and you have access to a calculator if you're unsure on how to do that, you gain 1 mark. Now that means that there are 2 stomata for every 0.01 millimetre squared, but it's asking for the number of stomata per millimetre squared. So in order to get that, we're going to have to take that 2 and multiply it by 100, because 0.01 times 100 will get you 1 millimetre squared. So 2 times 100 is 200. If you just put 200, then you would get both marks, but I would definitely suggest, as you were told in maths, to show your working at all times, because you might get marks for bits, steps that you've taken that are correct, even if your final answer is not correct. So if you put 0.1 times 0.1 is 0.01 millimetre squared, that would have picked you up a mark. Okay, 3.4. A different plant species has 400 stomata per millimetre squared of leaf surface. Having a large number of stomata per millimetre squared of leaf surface can be a disadvantage to a plant. Give one disadvantage. Now we know the stomata are there for gas exchange, so letting carbon dioxide in, oxygen out, but that's an advantage. So what would be a disadvantage? The other thing that leaves the stomata is water. So having too many of them would mean that you would lose too much water. So if you've put anything about increasing water loss or losing too much water or more water is lost, anything like that, that would be where you get your mark from. So well done if you got that. Okay, next question. The student investigated the loss in water from plant leaves. The student did the following. Took 10 leaves from a plant, weighed all 10 leaves, hung the leaves up in the classroom for 4 days, weighed all 10 leaves again, calculated the mass of water lost by the leaves, repeated steps 1 to 5 with grease spread on the upper surfaces of the leaves and with grease spread on both the upper and lower surfaces of the leaves. All the leaves were taken from the same type of plant. Table 2 shows the students' results. So we've got what happened to the leaves, so no grease, grease on the upper surface and grease on the upper and lower surfaces. And we've got the mass of water the leaves lost in grams. So with no grease was 0.98 grams, grease on just the upper surface was 0.86 grams, grease on the upper and lower surfaces was 0.01 grams. What mass of water was lost in 4 days through the upper surfaces of the leaves? 1 mark. Now the 1 mark tells me I only need to do one thing, so it's only going to be one step to this. But actually, it's a little bit tricky because you need to make the link between the mass of water lost when there's no grease and the mass of water lost when there's grease in the upper surfaces, because that will tell you how much water would have been lost from the upper surface. So in order to do this, we need to find the difference between the two numbers. So it's 0.98 minus 0.86. So the answer is 0.12. Again, I know that in maths you're encouraged to do a lot of mental arithmetic, and that's great, but you are allowed calculators in all of your science exams, so please always use a calculator afterwards just to double check that you have got the correct answer. Okay, 3.6, and the last question of our mini assessment says very little water was lost when the lower surfaces of the leaves were covered in grease. Explain why. So in this, we've got the command word saying explain, so we need to say why it is happening or not happening in this case, and it's worth 3 marks. So the first mark, if you've made the connection that there's more stomata on the lower surfaces, then that would be worth a mark. So if you've put the lower surface of the leaf has more stomata, that would be great. That would be worth 1 mark. But if you've got any sentence that makes the connection that there's going to be more stomata on the lower surface, then that's worth a mark. If you've then said that the stomata have been covered or blocked by the grease, then that would be your second mark. The third mark is going to be for the command word explain. So this is where you are saying why it's happened. So if you've said, so the water cannot escape or the water cannot leave the leaf, then that would be a third mark. If you've just put that, then obviously that's still worth a mark, even on its own. You just wouldn't have the first 2 marks. So that is it from our walking talking mocks. From my calculations, and I'm often wrong as I'm totaling up the numbers, I made it out of 30. Correct me if I am wrong, if you notice any different. But if you can give yourself a mark out of 30, and like last time, if you could either email it or put it on Show My Homework, what your total was. That would be great, just so that we can see how you've gotten on. So very well done for another set of revision. This was a big topic, the organisation. There was a lot of revision lessons for this. Very well done if you did well on the test that was set. Keep up the good work. Next week, for our final sort of science week, we're going to be revising one of the other topics. So good work, keep it up for the last week before the summer holidays. Take care of yourself, and you'll hear from me next week. Goodbye.